Hello, Ivy here. This week's podcast is a little different. It is about Sussex Global UK's first 100 podcasts, covering the period from June 2021 to early July 2023. We look at the main themes and summarise. So, first of all, an introduction. This podcast is different to the usual style because it is an outline of every podcast that has been produced on this channel to date and divided up into categories. When I embarked on this journey of setting up a channel on my own, it was done with the intention of supporting Harry and Meghan, but in such a way that was in keeping with the values shown on the Archewell Foundation website. And importantly, I wanted to try, wherever possible, to try and ensure that my opinions were evidence-based and corroborated wherever possible with academic research. My background prior to retirement was in human resources and in particular policy and strategy, including workforce planning and development, all to chartership status. The aim here was for each podcast to be informative and entertaining at the same time. I looked at the treatment of Harry and Meghan from a human resource perspective, and in particular a psychological perspective, and used academic models and approaches in terms of assessment and categorization of a widening range of punitive measures by certain protagonists, wrapped up, i.e. hidden, behind pseudo-descriptions, aka excuses, and in so doing, tried to balance entertainment with evidence. Any academic models used were used as a user-friendly way to depict in a diagram or chart situations or behaviours that we had explored for most of each podcast. Research never dominated each podcast, but was there to rubber stamp our discussions. Most podcasts were accompanied by an article, which listed most of the reference sources used to put the podcast together. Some of the earlier podcasts did not have an article published, but I soon realised that it was a methodical way to record everything moving forward. For those who doubted how I came to have the thoughts I had about the abusive treatment used against Harry and Meghan, and then their children, it would help when the time came to publish all of those articles and views and research in one place. This summary relates to the first 100 episodes of podcasts on the SGUK channel, commencing in June 2021 and reaching 100 episodes in early July 2023. All shown on YouTube, and the audio versions on all mainstream audio outlets. You will note that in recent weeks the focus of the channel is to focus only on the work and experiences of Harry and Meghan, as they choose to publicise information and to ignore the usual British style of media reporting, which is news created for distraction, as opposed to the authentic news happening at any one time. There was a podcast done on this very subject, which basically stated that any nation that creates the news, as opposed to writing about real news, has a failing economy and is the main reason for this distraction. This channel no longer reports on day-to-day fake drama. We focus on real people who are helping others or those who are in receipt of assistance in some way by focusing on the work of the Archewell Foundation or community groups who operate on the same values in their aim to help others. As Harry and Meghan state on their website, it is a handheld, not a handout. The framework for this podcast summary. The categories that emerged from those 100 episodes are as follows. Coordinated hate online, history, mental health, legal, value for money, and a very small section on miscellaneous, which were specialist episodes focusing on an event, such as a summary of podcasts at key points, for example, end of year. It is useful to point out here that there are podcasts listed under each of the above categories, but most of them appear under other categories too, but to a lesser degree. For the purpose of summarising the 100 episodes, they have been included in the one where the episode features more on that topic, though in a few cases there are other categories where I said it was a close call, but they are listed under the one where they have the highest percentage. So let's have a look at coordinated hate online. The podcasts that came under this heading are as follows. Podcast 4, Herd Mentality. Podcast 7, Welcome to the Hunger Games. Number 9, Government Propaganda Failing. 12, Who will be the next whipping boy or girl? 15, Collective Narcissism. 44, That Ship Sail Bro. 47, Welcome to the Windsor Twilight Zone. 63, Some support charities and some swarm charities with toxicity. 73, Karens and Kevins. I explored herd mentality and whether or not we are programmed to behave this way. I discussed why people hate and what happens in our brains when we do. The differences and connections between love and hate. I have done a small amount of research on crowd psychology, whether it be physically together or via online platforms, and why and how people fall or move into group decisions on what and how they post, etc. I returned to a topic that was touched upon in a podcast from the previous year, comparing the similarities between the UK monarchy and the cult, where I explored the psychology of propaganda and how it can manifest itself in everyday living, as opposed to times of wartime conflict. Conflict is still present, and the intent to persuade groups of the population to believe and come to a preset conclusion is still at play in any society, who are not immediately identified as being involved in a much wider game at play. What is deemed to be hateful? There is no international legal definition of hate speech, and the characterization of what is termed hateful is controversial and disputed. In terms of what the United Nations understand hate speech to be, and as outlined in their strategy plan of action on hate speech, it states this as follows. Any kind of communication in speech, writing or behaviour that attacks or uses pejorative or discriminatory language with reference to a person or a group on the basis of who they are, in other words, their religion, ethnicity, nationality, race, colour, descent, or other identifying factor. Herd mentality. A natural desire to be part of the in-crowd. In the case of the Sussexes, this analogy of herd mentality seems apt. The Queen Bee has left the UK and the swarm of hate has followed. What is this herd mentality that is developing over a person that most will never meet, but yet dominates their thought processes 24/7? Dr. Michael Linden a psychiatrist based in the USA, derived the term obsessive hatred. People who become obsessed with what they see as an injustice. They talk and think about nothing else. Cases tend to be things in personal lives, for example, divorcing or separating couples. For example, in this case, think here of the British royal family, royal reporters, media, and the royal fans. That is, how they are dealing with the loss of one member of the royal family to another continent, shaking what was deemed as solid ground for decades to come. The transition from UK tax-funding royal to becoming a self-financing global corporate giant in less than a year shook the aforementioned groups to the core. Their shock turned to anger, and for the first few years has grown to hatred of dangerous proportions, with death threats openly posted or implied on social media and in the UK tabloids. The UK has sunk so low in that regard, it is not even news anymore. It is seen as normal rhetoric of the UK taxpayers expressing their opinion of a member of the royal family leaving the UK and taking his wife and children with him. A family that the loudest voices were quick to say it did not matter as they were irrelevant, and ultimately they will return to the fold. There were quite a few articles that supposedly summarised the so-called "We welcomed Meghan to the British royal family" and the UK media spin, since news was published about the relationship between Prince Harry and Meghan Markle in the summer of 2016. From the very first article published by the Daily Mail and the other gossip publications masquerading as newspapers, it was very clear about the stance it was adopting. Initially, it was very colonialist in its tone, i.e., talking down to and about Meghan, deliberately disparaging the acting profession, but particularly the acting industry in the USA. It aimed to give the impression that it was a profession that was more suited to bargain basement activities, where people with no talent or skill gravitated and were treated like stars, but somehow it was deemed to be below the standard of UK monarchy. It's laughable, really, because if you reverse those roles, it would be so accurate in terms of the royal family. But I digress. Most of us have never believed that about either group, but more interestingly, since 2016, and the journey of hate and destruction that the Daily Mail in particular embarked on openly, people who had zero interest in the royal family started to take an interest. And over the last 6 years or so, increasing numbers of people are changing their views of the royal family, and not in a good way. Most have publicly stated that they had no opinion about Meghan either way, but they have now seen enough evidence to come to the conclusion that there are double standards being employed here with how Meghan is portrayed in the media and anyone else in the British royal family, but in particular Kate, the Duchess of Cambridge. Over these years, Meghan has secured 2 victorious decisions in the UK courts against the Daily Mail. Since 2016, the coverage has been disgusting, and the treatment of Meghan being deliberately put up as a target of hate took its toll. In January 2020, Prince Harry announced that they were stepping back from senior royal duties and would spend most of their time resident in another country. Prince Harry said that they were leaving the UK due to the increasing risks to their lives and mental health. It later transpired that Meghan had suffered suicidal ideations during her pregnancy with Archie and asked for assistance from the Human Resources team, who refused, stating that she was not an employee of the British royal family. Remember, no finance had been allocated to Meghan upon marriage into the family, like every other person who marries into the royal family. It was clear that Meghan was not regarded as family either, and there were concerns during that first pregnancy about what skin tone the baby would have. All the details of the above abusive behaviour is well documented in podcasts and articles on the SGUK platform, as well as the wider Sussex Squad podcasts and general media global community. Needless to say, the forces working to prevent the marriage of the Sussexes taking place in 2018, and then efforts to destroy Meghan's mental health to the point she would leave, and then the refusal of medical assistance for suicidal thoughts, only leaves one conclusion as to what the UK monarchy was looking to achieve. During this period, the Royal Human Resources team and royal reporters were in regular contact. One royal reporter is on record in 2 separate broadcasts confirming that the royal rota were aware of Meghan's deteriorating state, and they were in regular contact and exchanging information with the HR team. Let us not forget that discussions between Human Resources with anyone external to the team is a serious data protection breach. And to have regular conversations with their media group that there was an ongoing legal case in operation, and the increasing death threats from various far-right groups have ensured a number of victories on that area of the law, should the Sussexes ever decide to pursue it, because there is no denying the UK media have themselves moved into cruel and sinister waters with their coverage of the Sussexes. Their plan to stop the marriage, etc., has now moved on to anger and disbelief that the couple stepped away from working as senior royals and put their family and their mental health of their family as a priority. UK media then basically lost the plot, and now, upon the orders of the UK monarchy, has thrown every rattle out of the pram, and is now trying to dismantle the pram, all to no avail, because the prey has left the building. But the anger and the need to score revenge points every day by just having yet another dig at this couple is placing them, without realising it, on a range of potential legal actions, as their activity has gone online and crosses international borders. The podcast uses the analogy of the behaviour of a narcissistic ex-partner who cannot accept that their abused ex-partner has finally managed to escape the virtual prison, and the methods and tactics used to try and get them to return. We explored how to recognise when you are in a toxic environment, workplace or family setting, and what to look out for when you leave. Recognise the tricks played and the mind games that follow. By the end of that particular podcast, you will be able to just easily see where the UK monarchy, family and its media entered the game at various points, and the manipulation they attempted at each stage, all leading up to the current gnashing of teeth and beating of chests and needing the Sussex law to shine on the family, who chase them out of the country, but want them to visit for set pieces and then leave again, and be prepared to be the royal chew toy for those occasions when the British royal family need international coverage. And let's be honest, they need more people in the UK to care about a UK monarchy. It is all too late, and we explained why over the next few minutes and pages. you'll see in this summary. That ship has sailed now. Years of abusive actions on UK soil, years where the main target was and remains a USA citizen. The Sussexes stepped back from senior royal duties at the end of March 2020, after announcing their decision on the 8th of January 2020. That 3-month period proved to be just the start of what the monarchy and its media were prepared to administer in that 12-month period decided by the monarchy, whereby the Sussexes were meant to reflect, and in theory could return to the fold if their plan failed within that period. Nothing in the reporting, both on TV and printed media in the UK, did anything to suggest that the UK was concerned about the welfare of the Sussexes. It was really about concern for the remaining members of the royal family. The same family who, for those 5 years or so, had been described as relevant, and the Sussexes being irrelevant in the grand scheme of things. Only the royal family and its media were convinced that Harry and Meghan would fail, and published negative and inflammatory articles and held TV discussions with non-entity individuals who all of a sudden had expertise on such matters to come onto TV and make their points. Sussex Squad knew that they would be a huge success, and there was no way they would be returning to an abusive environment and raise their children in such toxicity that had existed for centuries in UK royal palace life. In that first year, the Sussexes secured lucrative business deals and purchased their first home. UK still refused to accept that not everyone considers being a member of the royal family as the ultimate pinnacle of life. The royal family and its media took and still do the rejection badly, and have been throwing tantrums and cruel actions ever since. What kind of person could fail to recognise that the ship had sailed? Let's have a look at the history category. There's lots of information, many podcasts on this, but this is just one aspect of it. And as I said, we list them all of the episodes, so you will be able to search for yourselves. So in terms of history, we look at both Dukes of Sussex. The majority of this narrative about the Dukes of Sussex centres more on the first Duke, not least to prepare the ground for the comparisons and similarities with the present day, of which we already know so much. So please bear with me as I spend some time on the summary of the first Duke. Along the way, you will each most likely identify things that link to Prince Harry's situation in some way or another. There is truly a wealth of information out there about most members of the British royal family, going back centuries. This podcast barely touches the surface of the information about the 12 surviving siblings of the first Duke of Sussex, let alone the information about his parents, whose mother was considered to be mixed race by a few brave historians, but on the whole, most historians did not comment about it. You may have noticed, if you have watched any of the Netflix series on Bridgerton, that Queen Charlotte was in fact a person of colour, without actually referring to the fact in the actual plays. So, current and former Duke of Sussex. They were and are considered somewhat rebellious. For example, they challenged age-old traditions and shatter royal stereotypes. Queen Victoria considered the first Duke of Sussex to be her favourite uncle, who did the honour of escorting her down the aisle when she married Prince Albert in 1840. An unspoken attitude to the existence of mixed race within royalty at that time. I would say that not much has changed. Prince Harry had to officially request permission to marry Meghan. With the world looking, the Queen did not opt to refuse. Yet, as we all know now, and most people acknowledge, that this was not one rogue member of staff, but a concerted effort by the British royal family to ensure that no wedding took place. I personally feel that even if the Queen had refused permission, Harry would have married Meghan anyway. In my mind, he's very similar to the first Duke of Sussex. History gives an insight on how the monarch has the power to erase hereditary entitlement or recognition if they so wish, under a variety of legislation and acts that only royals would ever have the need to use. The wording of the very acts themselves meant that no person outside of that structure could call upon it. Note how names are changed, like the first Duke of Sussex's first wife, using a name from her side of the family, and was in effect given money and a different title to make it look better, but she and her children were still excluded, but sugar-coated by giving her a Scottish title, and lived at a distance. When Augustus died, it was deemed he had no legitimate children to pass on his Duke of Sussex title, even though they had been born within a legitimate marriage, but one that was not approved by the monarch. Meghan's removal from Archie's birth certificate, but her title remaining, is significant, in my opinion. History will show the royalty element, but no mention of the person behind the title. Slavery mentality in full view. Without giving ideas to people, I can see a variety of ways the British royal family could have used aspects of royal law and procedures to other Meghan if Harry had put the royal family first. Harry leaving scuppered much of that scope of choice, I am sure. I maintain the choice of the Sussex dukedom was not accidental, though I think the royal family had different ideas in terms of its relevance than a sane-thinking, non-misogynistic person could see. I am sure that there was a very high element of shade when the choice was made, and very little of it was seen in a positive light. But courtiers and media could spin it like it was a fabulous wedding gift to the couple. I believe that the first Duke of Sussex would have liked Harry and Meghan. They stood their ground when all around them were shooting poison arrows. The first Duke married who he wanted, despite family opposition that he knew would follow. Both of his marriages were for love, and he did his best in the times that he lived in to secure payments for his first wife and children before they separated for good. The annulment made no difference to the emotions involved. Augustus was never considered at the level of other brothers in the family. He was seen as the weak one due to his asthma, and yet he was the one who quietly became very interested in the arts and music and politics, and very outspoken on slavery and race issues. He was very well read too. His living quarters were never as palatial as others in the family, but he travelled a lot and experienced more about life outside of royalty. Prince Harry had a tiny 2-bedroom cottage on Kensington Palace grounds. He was always treated like the second. When he asked for accommodation for him as a married man, he was allocated Frogmore Cottage, not a section of Frogmore House. Frogmore Cottage was former servants' quarters, and still the smallest accommodation by far compared to the rest of the wider family. In the same grounds of Frogmore is another royal who was deemed to be a rebel. Edward, who gave up the throne to marry Wallis Simpson. Everything thrown Harry's way, on the face of it, looked easy to spin in the media. But when examined closely, it was, and is, all shade. Harry, paying the faux renovation costs for a property that had designated funds in the sovereign grant in one go, scuppered the 12-year repayment deal that the royal family tried to sell to Harry. It is no coincidence that the Cambridge children would become adults in 10 to 12 years, respectively, in terms of George and Charlotte. Once again, trying to use him as the royal workhorse and whipping boy for distraction, press coverage, but still prepared to cast him aside at the British royal family's convenience in 12 years' time, under the disguise of him paying back a fictitious debt. You can see already how the institution is trying to do to Harry and Meghan's children what was done to the first Duke of Sussex's 2 children, i.e. removed from the line of inheriting anything from their father upon his death, packed off into the background with his mother allocated a name from her mother's side of the family, and over time meaning it would take an element of prior knowledge to find details of this lady and her 2 children. Every shady act done by the British royal family and the media to stop the wedding taking place failed. The fact that the British royal family acted quickly to remove footage of the Australian news interview with a certain person who admitted this plot existed and people were paid to stop the wedding. All footage in the main high-profile countries, as well as footage on the internet, was removed in hours. If this was not true, the British royal family would have been silent. The official reason for its removal was that 2 former group gossip publication personnel were named as being involved, and that they threatened to sue if it was not removed. Yeah, right. Even if that happened, that's not the reason why it was taken down. I'm convinced of that. Sussexes are free and are not dependent on the British royal family for their existence. The Sussexes are involved in impactful work globally and are very high profile. They have options. Augustus stipulated that when he died, he did not want to be buried on royal grounds. I hope that Harry and Meghan would do something similar when it comes to the christening, and I was pleased to hear that that happened. I would have respected their choice either way, but this pick and mix approach the British royal family keep on pushing in order to deflect or to make the firm feel relevant and important is becoming tiresome now. Leave them to their games. They are in the dust clouds of the Sussexes now, anyway. My takeaway from looking into the life of the first Duke of Sussex is that Prince Harry has more in common with the first Duke on the things that royalty want to pretend does not exist, or did not happen in that way. The royal family were trying to appear generous and celebrating the marriage, when in fact every so-called gift was a rotten apple, and much like their day-to-day life, it was all performative and nothing of real substance. I will think of both Dukes of Sussex as kindred spirits, who married who they loved, and did not follow royal tradition and protocol just because it was there. They were and are independent thinkers, and who were involved in wider initiatives outside of the traditional royal family performative tasks. I think that the Dukes would have liked each other, and the mixed race element in their family line, despite what the majority of records show, is an added joy. The Sussexes are making history with a range of innovative projects which are benefiting a wide scope of people. Meghan is the first Duchess of Sussex, not least because the Queen could not be seen to refuse the marriage, so despite trying other activities to destroy this union, the fact remains that the history will show Meghan's name and title, just like the American birth certificate, so the one amended in the UK is the only document that is different, compared to all the others in history books of the future. As to the reasons behind the amendment, yes, I think the two Dukes of Sussex would have got along just fine. Third category, mental health issues. Mental health. The following factors could potentially result in a period of poor mental health: childhood abuse, trauma or neglect, social isolation or loneliness, experiencing discrimination and stigma, including racism, social disadvantage, poverty or debt, bereavement, losing someone close to you, severe or long-term stress, having a long-term physical health condition, unemployment or losing your job, homelessness or poor housing, being a long-term carer for someone, drug and alcohol misuse, domestic violence, bullying or other abuse as an adult, significant trauma as an adult, such as military combat, being involved in a serious incident in which you feared for your life, or being the victim of a violent crime. Physical causes, for example, a head injury or a neurological condition such as epilepsy, can have an impact on your behaviour and mood. It is important to rule out potential physical causes before seeking further treatment for a mental health problem. Podcasts that come under the heading of mental health. 5. Stages of leaving an abusive relationship. 10. Psychology of jealousy and envy. 11. Let go of toxic people in your life. Set boundaries. 13. Response from a freed slave to former master's letter. 52. The psychology of resentment. 56. Not even the king. 57. Still they rise. 67. One group playing drafts, one group playing chess. 74. Royal psychological warfare across borders. 75. Fragile ego and leadership. 85. Brand UK equals dysfunctionality, monarchy and government. 86. It is okay to cut toxic family members out of your life. 87. Separation cycle of abuse. 95. Never underestimate the power of the mind. My question is why this international piece of legislation, which is in force with some amendments to ensure that it suits the UK legal framework, does not appear to be applied to the Sussexes. Whether it should come into play as Prince Harry is a UK citizen, or whether it is applicable in the USA as it is now the home of the Sussexes. I am merely inquisitive as to why UK media are using the same piece of legislation in different ways for two members of the royal family, i.e. one is allowed to use it to stop articles and discussions about his private life, but the other is chased and written about daily, with no regard to the law in existence. Regardless of titles, Prince Harry and his family are no less deserving of protection under the law. This summary is an overview of the current vacuum of activity on the international stage, and human rights violations exist in all layers of financial and economic groups. It is a failure of the current system that 7 years later, a family of 4 still have no peace, but at least they have managed to move away and finance a huge security initiative due to the risks that one member of that family was born into and the huge increase in risk to the Sussexes' health and safety. And as a direct result, that they chose to leave the UK for their mental health and to pay their own way in life. It is an indictment that their lives are still in danger and that of their children, not least because the British royal family removed their security as a punishment for them wanting to move away from the abuse. Abuse created by the monarchy and its arrangement with the tabloid media. It is well overdue for various agencies on human rights, in tandem with the United Nations groups, to step in now and stop this continued abuse, which is being ignored because it started behind gilded gates and now continues daily towards the USA family with the aim to destroy the mother and her children and for the prince to return to the slave plantation in an opulent setting and just accept that the powers that be do not care. Most of the Caucasian people in the UK don't care either, because they have bigger problems to deal with, like how they put food on the table. Yet despite all of that, as long as the royal family remains white, they have no real issue of a person of colour being treated badly, and have no sympathy for Harry because he dared to marry outside the white gene pool, where he was supposed to shop. They will happily continue to live in financial difficulties as long as the UK emblem family stays white. It seems to give some kind of comfort and memories of the empire. I ask USA President Biden and his team to think seriously about what is happening to USA's family on USA soil. A 7-year campaign of hatred which shows no signs of abating. The events of the 6th of January on the Capitol building gives you an idea of the similar forces being played out in the UK. Leaving the EU is part of that belief system. Harry and Meghan and their children are entitled to be protected under the law like everyone else. What is happening is not right. This couple have a history of community engagement and philanthropy. Archwell is already in its first 3 years of operation working on so many global projects. I would like to see the international legal community give them reasonable safety and protection under the law as a recognition of this growing problem around the world. Hate groups are forming without challenge. This cannot continue. No one is more deserving of protection under the law than anyone else. We gave examples which prove how all of the above has fed into the online community, not least because it can reach more people in one go than any other medium, and in so doing makes it a valuable and useful tool for abusers and abusive organisations and groups to conduct abusive activity from one part of the world to a target or targets based in a completely different country, and in some cases on a different continent. International law advocates and senior professionals in this field need to factor this into actions against delivery methods used in this way to adults as well as to children. The abusers are able to play cyber warfare by manipulating the minds of millions who have access to the information being put out to the masses, to manipulate mindsets and in so doing change points of view. It can lead to the build-up of making someone more popular than if none of this manipulation had been attempted, and likewise it can cause vast numbers to begin to harbour resentment against a person or group based on the drip impact of a type of rhetoric which appears in increasing frequency in printed and televised media, and where some of the phrases used are repeated by a few people in those societal groups mentioned previously. And before very long, social media is swamped by hordes of people supporting the same messages, targeting the same people, and whose accounts are often days old. Both sides of this coin of delivering two messages based on the target of the love or hate are very dangerous indeed. Whatever the outcome, as the activity increases in the type of delivery and scale of the action, those who devise the warfare are never on the front line, and the people who have fallen for the hype at all stages of the hierarchy of hate models we have also covered previously are collateral damage. They are doing what was intended from the start, and they all believe with a passion that they have found their niche and that they are doing what they are doing will lead to a better world, knowing that their target of choice is indeed a bad person and will not be missed, and at worst, even if they still exist, they will be broken psychologically. And in the eyes of those who form the collateral damage groups, their purpose will have been achieved. Another person who has been taken down in their eyes only will no longer outshine the chosen ones, chosen by those who devised the warfare in the first place, but who can stand there with their hands behind their backs, looking innocent, and representing their nation like good figureheads are there to do. And most of the population will be focused on the next target in the population, to give them relevance again, to get up each morning and to talk tactics with their peers, and it returns to game on again. That is what modern society has become in increasing areas, and decent people need to wake up and recognise that they are controlled pawns in a much wider game, and should consider how they would feel if they or their peer group suddenly becomes the chosen prey for the next few years or decade. Would it still be easy to get up each morning and face the day? One of the British royal family biggest mistakes was constantly pushing Harry into a corner, in the belief that he would fold and become compliant again. The forces against the Sussexes underestimated, big time, the psychological forces at play in these scenarios that they continued to construct, and the mind that they thought they were weakening was growing in strength. I have included a few stages of how the mind processes experiences and how it can eventually lead to strength and resolve beyond the imagination or expectation of the abusers involved. Make no mistake, all those involved in trying to break down this couple or be the cause of the end of a life were and are all abusers. Tried to make Harry walk away from his wife and their unborn first child by forcing him into a metaphorical corner where it was deemed he had next to no options but to come out of the said corner. Just like most sentient beings, you can only push a person so far, and should they come out of the said corner, they will come out fighting. The abusers should take heed that nothing that occurs from here on in is a last moment thought, especially when you are dealing with a high-achieving veteran. The FA and find out phase was underway, and the UK British royal family and its media were about to enter the find out stage. The push into that metaphorical corner continued, as we shall briefly describe, but the exit out of that corner was like an explosion going off. The UK-based abusers were not ready, But now it matters not if they have accepted their fate. There is no denial that Harry has left the building. And the mirage of a small victim fighting against her Herculean foe was just that. And now the roles have reversed, and the small human has grown so much that he's Herculean himself, but this time with his strength growing each day, and has risen to added iconic global glory, which has resulted in Meghan and Harry are not only out of reach and control of the British royal family and royal reporters, but they are continuing to grow in stature, and every poison arrow sent their way from Bitter Island, otherwise known as the UK, always returns to sender, with the poison now even more potent than when it was originally sent out. Let's have a look at legal and list the podcasts that came under that category. And actually, while I'm looking at it and thinking about my notes here, I didn't read out the list of podcasts that come under history, but there is a slide, well, there's more than one slide on each of these categories. They're all listed there, and they are all definitely in the article under the appropriate heading. So you'll have that information. So don't worry about the ones that I didn't read out for history. Legal category. Meghan, working royal or slave? That was podcast 2. Podcast 3, human rights protection under the law. 6, coercive control, California bill passed in September 2020. 14, hereditary monarchy. Can it work in a modern society? 19, coercive control, call to action. 20, the escalation of online hate. 26, International Bill of Rights. 29, blurred lines between monarchy and government. 30, reporting on the Sussexes in the UK, misinformation and disinformation. 31, who do narcissistic men target? 33, it is a royal knockout. 34, I have a dream. 36, scapegoating, the psychology of family and groups. 38, international call to action, are human rights breaches in plain sight. 42, California princess to UK Cinderella to global princess. 43, coercive control across borders. 46, UK media obsession, stalking and harassment. 59, what is the endgame of UK media? 61, UK media snakes and ladders journey around the 7 stages of grief model. 64, James Baldwin on justice and equality. 65, UK media obsession with a USA citizen, whilst ignoring the UK royal family who they are paid to write about. 76, how dark will the baby be? 81, royal reporters, time up. 88, justice will be served, call to action. 90, hate for hire. 93, UK media, we need to talk about ethics. Legal implications arise in most of the podcasts published in some shape or form. The overriding issues centre on the lack of legal action taken by those who hold that responsibility here in the UK. Like so many other areas of life in the UK, the law only seems to apply to certain groups, and those in various societal groups who have some level of power in their respective groups are allowed a much wider range of behaviour without challenge. The human rights campaign that this channel has been working on for over a year has given up on any UK-based legal activity, and we have taken our concerns to a variety of international legal advocates and experts based in a number of countries. We are now in the position of holding 7 years and counting of data regarding abusive treatment carried out via targeted activity, sanctioned by people in powerful positions higher up in the system. Our research has shown an increasing number of groups around the globe who have been treated in similar ways and who have received no recourse from within their country, or at best rely on small community organisations who are doing fantastic work against the backdrop of much of the legal resources in place are out of reach of most of the population within each country. This means that international legal forums are needed in this regard, and in particular where the methodology of delivering abuse to targeted victims is being done using online methods. The law needs to reflect the growing ways that hate can be delivered to adults and children, without the abuser needing to live in the same state or country. We are aware that the law cannot change overnight, but we are long overdue for discussions to take place between legal advocates and those who hold positions in international legal forums to recognise this development and to actively look at ways in which the system and processes can be updated to take account of newer ways of causing harm to others. In the case of the Duke and Duchess of Sussex, abusive activity has continued across continents, and now that the family reside in a state which did such an awful amount of work to have a new coercive control bill passed in September 2020, it seems unfathomable to me that a USA citizen was abused for 3 years on UK soil and had suicidal ideations by year 3 because Meghan was unprotected by any agency in the UK and worse by any agency in the USA and the place of her birth. One man stepped up to the plate, and if it was not for this angel walking this earth, I dread to think what would have happened. The risk of tragedy was very high and increasing. The governor and the senator for California, who did so much work to get that bill passed, have presided over this situation where certain people and groups in the UK are comfortable doing what they do daily to a USA citizen without fear of challenge. Not all abusers live in the same state or country or even continent. The system of contacting either of you by email is equally flawed, as it only accepts communication from local residents. As a result, someone like myself, who has tried multiple times, is unable to provide you evidence of what has been going on, and continues 7+ years later, because I do not reside in the USA, never mind in California. I would love to know how anyone from outside the USA, and in this case from the UK, could then raise this issue with two people who have done so much in this area and who would be excellent on the campaign group to give advice to a small working group made up of different international legal representatives from around the world. Each advocate from around the globe on our database has much that they could bring to the table to help discussions forward. The Human Rights Campaign features the Duke and Duchess of Sussex, but it also has many other people who could also use a helping hand. If my having a high-profile couple give prominence to this campaign, then all the better. This campaign group from this podcast channel is not proposing to be involved in any future discussions between yourselves. We have many on our database that could be a starting point for suggestions, but the legal advocates, elected members who have a responsibility to ensure that their constituents are safe from harm, and the authors and the specialists who we have included because of their knowledge on this area of abusive behaviour, and of course Mr. Tyler Perry, because this is the only person who has stepped up to the plate over and over again to uplift communities. I hope those who are listening or viewing this summary will be moved to do more, and a starting point would be to ensure that Sussex family are protected from UK media and partners. The Sussexes are not funded by UK taxpayers, they fund their own security. The constant day-to-day drip feed of hate incitement rhetoric from UK media, televised and printed, needs to be handled with international law because the UK is a broken country right now. And since it removed itself from the European Union, the treatment of people of colour in particular reflects the mindset that led to Brexit. It is time for the USA to step forward and protect all of its citizens. Mr. Perry cannot do it all. Every day, for everyone. Elected officials are there for a reason. As a gentle reminder, and also as said, this has been covered in far more detail in previous podcasts, but we are summarising here. What are human rights? Human rights are standards that allow all people to live with dignity, freedom, equality, justice, and guarantee to everyone without distinction of any kind, such as race, colour, sex, language, religion, political or other opinion, national or social origin, property, birth or other status. Human rights are part of international law, contained in treaties and declarations that spell out specific rights that countries are required to uphold. Some countries incorporate human rights in their own national state and local laws. Our final section in this summary is value for money, and the podcasts that covered that topic are as follows. 17. Being royal and being philanthropic. 23. Which members of the British royal family are publicly funded? 24. The business of royal propaganda. 25. Private and royal patronages. 37. A nation that creates the news, as opposed to reporting the news, has a failing economy. 41. When the service model becomes obsolete. 48. Your workforce plan is all wrong. 53. The Lost Souls of Windsor. 54. Slow dancing in a burning room. 58. You don't need eyes to see, you need vision. 66. Could AI replace royal reporters? 68. The fish always rots from the head. 69. The Magnificent Seven, coming to a town near you soon. 70. Cocoon, the return to Windsor. 71. UK royal voyage to the bottom of the sea. 72. House of Cards. 81. Royal reporters. Time up. 82. A symbiotic relationship. Time up. 92. We see you. 94. Clout chasing for relevance. This category has grown throughout the lifetime of this channel. There are increasing numbers of people questioning the need for a monarchy. Currently, all the top societal groups are working hard to protect each other and retain their current way of life. On their own, they are weaker, but together they have managed to hold on to power. These groups are the British royal family, the government, aristocracy, the police, media, printed and TV. Republican groups are growing within the population. Most royalists are aged 65 and above, which mirrors the span of the age group of the 7 senior royals. UK people aged 25 and below represent a single figure in terms of interest in having a royal family. All those societal groups are intent in reducing the effectiveness of human rights legislation within the UK. It is already underway. Time is well overdue for the international legal forums to look at the international landscape and review their current stance. You will see on the slides and in more detail in the accompanying article for this summary the podcast that looked at value for money and why and how it became an issue. Conclusions to bring this summary to a close. All of the Sussex Global UK podcasts use academic models of well-known scenarios to help explain what I am trying to say when I refer to certain groups and behaviours. One example was a podcast based on the Hunger Games franchise, but the methodology of using one well-known example to explain what has been or continues to go on in royal circles and its partners can be and was applied in the 100 podcasts in some shape or form. Here's an extract from a podcast about a form of Hunger Games to give everyone new to the channel an idea of elements of the framework used in portraying quite serious subjects and their outcomes. Welcome to the Royal Hunger Games was one of the podcasts in this category. By using the main themes of the books and the film franchise of the Hunger Games, I hope to make viewers and listeners smile a little, at the same time recognising the failing society which is growing here on Skull Island, otherwise known as Shutter Island and officially known as the UK. Just like the books and the film franchise, the ruling classes keep their transgressions hidden by a series of distraction. It is a place built on class divisions. In my opinion, all the various categories I am using as examples in this podcast reflect those divisions, and each one is fighting for relevance, and if necessary, will destroy anyone who gets in the way and is perceived to be changing a way of life that has existed for as long as they can remember. Let me introduce the players in each category. 1. The British royal family. Monarchy. Activity type. Unknown, but similar to grifters. Right-wing figurehead family. 2. Media barons. Royal reporters rota. TV media included in this category. Activity type. Propaganda team for British royal family. 3. Aristocracy. Activity. Unknown, but appears like a fake society and gene pool for the British royal family. 4. National government. Activity. To ensure that the above groups all continue to exist, and to try and replicate the Hunger Games approach on the rest of the world, where a few countries have grouped together for access to shared markets in a similar style in some ways to the UK in its isolationist approach beyond its borders. It is not working out quite as much, or in the way the UK would have liked. Having withdrawn all its toys from the groups who want to play by the consensus approach, the country is beginning to be a little worse for wear at the moment. No matter, one of the distraction topics to get all the above groups talking is to focus on the one centre of worker bees in the country, who have started to exercise independent thought in recent years, and to provide their services and products on a global stage, whilst retaining their mental health, and have the freedom to expand their workforce for the greater good, and to provide universal service on a global scale, without increasing risk to their health and safety. On the 8th of January 2020, this Centre of Excellence declared its aims and objectives, and by the end of March 2020, they set up a new office on another continent. It is doing very well. Meanwhile, back on Skull Island, the various groups have become apoplectic. As a result, a new group has emerged. Enter the final group on this list. The Keyboard Warriors. Activity: to spend 23.5 hours every day searching for things they can blame the global entrepreneurs to invent new theories about, their lifestyle and whether or not they are actually human. At the same time, they pretend to show allegiance to the British royal family, but the reality is any Caucasian figurehead family would be expressed as their ideal, without actually doing anything tangible to prolong their existence, or the number of charities which on paper are linked to the British royal family in some way. The main purpose of this group is to generate hate and spread the hatred they have created between themselves, as it is their food source. And when none is readily available, create something and run with that, following in the footsteps of the carnival of clown experts, who work in a vacuum at the best of times and exist purely on lies and hate inciting activity. But in recent times, their food supply is so low now, it is not worth including them as a category. They are on the way to becoming extinct, so there was little point including them in the Hunger Games tournament of 2021. The Keyboard Warriors feel they are a cut above that group. I mean, they make diagrams and use crayons and things, really detailed. They spend money obtaining documentation on a range of things, claiming it to be proof of their various theories. Their hunger is huge, but it must be said, their food sources are suspect, and as these sources are never shared with others in the tournament, they may go in the same direction of the so-called Carnival of Clowns. I suspect law enforcement is waiting in the wings for one or two in both categories. End of that little summary of the Hunger Games podcast. All participants in the Hunger Games want to win for their category, but are mindful of throwing the odd carrot in the direction of other people, of other groups, because they recognise without each other in place, supporting the other members of the tournament, none would survive and would go the way of the Carnival of Clown experts, and possibly soon be joined by the Keyboard Warriors. Our focus here at SGUK will continue to be centred on areas for improvement in the online community, looking for ways to have trust again in information, zero faith in anything that involves UK media in any form, and helping to uplift communities in any way that we can and to promote those groups that do this every day. I am particularly proud of podcast 73, Karen's and Kevin's. Some of the communication received on this channel is vile and toxic. Every post is moderated so they never reach the public view. This particular podcast was one which I hope clearly demonstrated what this channel is all about, and that we are above all of this coordinated hate incitement distraction activity. As dangerous as it is in some cases, I am hopeful that the international legal forums mentioned earlier will take on board the seriousness of this aspect of abusive behaviour. There are some plates that channels like this one cannot keep spinning or even try. We deal with things within our control, and the rest we direct to those responsible for maintaining law and order. I hope you found this quick foray around our 100 podcast episodes of interest. Here is to the next 100. That's the end of podcast 101. The article will be out on Monday, as usual, on my website, and I will post a link when it is ready. far more detail. There are quite a lot of slides with this one. I'm sorry it's gone over the hour, but we're talking about nearly 2 years of podcasts here. Hope that has been of interest and also educational. So speak to you all Sunday onwards. Bye from me. Bye from Ivy. Bye.